going to take a little bit more effort than usual getting back into the GBOH Alexander here. Just because I've been away from it for so long. I'm used to kind of alternating every other game being one of these, but had a couple of things I had agreed to do, and ended up kind of feeling a little rushed there. So I'll be a little bit of I'm going to be a little rusty on this one. This is Pelium, and it's actually going to be two parts on the same map. First battle or engagement is going to be historically that Alexander withdrew across this stream or river when first faced with the enemy. This is another one of his consolidation battles. I believe he's in Illyria here, trying to get the empire, the Macedonian Empire that he inherited, essentially back into shape. And I think what the next one's Grampus, which gets us to the Persians, because he really didn't fight much with the Greeks after this. What he we have one Greek battle a little later. Anyway, what the designers believe here is that Alexander didn't have his whole force with him when he first started the siege of Pelium, and as more tribal forces arrived, he had to pull back. So in order to do that, we've got some special rules for this scenario. The first is, well, the fort is going to cost 3 movement points, and I don't know, all I have is this bridge, so that's what I'm going to take as the only way across, is the ford there. You get 2 cohesion hits for crossing the ford, although you're basically over, but we'll see how tightly contested that is. Phalanx have to cross in column, and it takes all of its movement allowance to first have 1/2 of the unit cross the ford. This leaves the column astride the ford. The next turn, the entire unit will be out of the river in column formation with 2 cohesion hits for fording. All missile hits taken while a phalanx is astride the river are going to be doubled. Any phalanx that routes is eliminated. That's pretty much there anyway. And the Illyrian units can't cross the river. Pelium itself, units may enter or leave the town only at the gates. They may not move through a gate into an enemy zone of control. There's no cost to exit Pelium, but the unit expends all of its movement to enter Pelium hexes. The units may not stack, and they may not be shock attacked or fired at. This is a siege that's beginning. There really is no chance of just taking the town out in the length of a normal battle. Exception: if an Illyrian unit inside Pelium fires at a Macedonian unit, the latter can fire back outside to inside, and it gets a penalty to its die roll. So they can either button down or engage. Road units in column pay only a 1/2 movement point to enter a road hex, as long as they're moving from one hex to the other. The retreat edge, north side, south side, pretty obvious. We got some army withdrawal levels, which apply to both scenarios. The Illyrians have a fairly large army, the Macedonians do not. Because when the Macedonians eventually do attack at night, they're not bringing their whole force anyway. So, this is our setup. Victory conditions: the Macedonians have to retreat at least 50 tactical quality points, plus Alexander, across the river by game turn 10 without causing an army withdrawal. Or if they rout the Illyrians, they just win. The Illyrians win if they can rout the Macedonian army, or if the Macedonians fail to withdraw their quality by the end of turn 10. There's something else here. Reinforcements. At the conclusion of the second game turn, we're going to get, and I've not seen these yet, 4 of these oxybellies. They have their own role, but here's their combat capabilities spelled out in brief. I'll look to see if they have more going on. On any hex south of the Apsos River, this is the first historical use of recorded use of artillery in a field operation. So there we have it. Alexander uses his lead initiative to backpedal with his, actually reverse face and move back, with his phalanxes, drop them into column, and then he's moving the entire left flank over to screen it. We'll see if this is enough. This could get really ugly very fast. Some of the tribals coming forward, and we get a momentum here. Now the big question is, do you risk Alexander trumping? Because on an 8 or a 9, that means no movement this turn. I think the answer is no, it's just too big a risk. So I'm going to allow that momentum to continue. Very seldom see this kind of hellbent type charge happening in a GBOH game, just because the nature of the these tribals have moved more than once. He got full 2 momentums, so we got some damaged units, but the nature of the ancient combat is such that sometimes maybe you'll take a double move, but you usually don't want to charge units and fatigue them that much, so your additional momentum is usually reorganizing your units, preparing them for the attack or whatever. But in this case, time is so important that we're trying to rush forward. Now, we may be exposing ourselves. We may be seeing some of the companions or something smacking into that infantry. And if things go well enough, the Macedonians could just win the battle in this sort of intended rearguard action. We'll still do the second version of it, the night attack, because that seems interesting too. And then with the momentum move, the guys on this hill were able to hit the phalanx. They didn't destroy it. Luckily the phalanxes, they did enough cohesion hits, but the phalanxes still have their saving throw. Albeit in column, they're at -2. Now the neat thing about that is it means that they succeeded and are in better shape than they would be if they had to make a saving throw against a 7. And things look kind of dangerous for Alexander. Maybe he should have taken that trump capability because he could have slid down, but these guys have a lot of range from where they were attacking. Where they, the cav could have stood, but that's usually a bad idea. This is a trickier situation than it looks. Now I've got one more chance at a momentum here, and this time it fails. Maybe I should have trumped in when these guys started moving, because they were clearly posing a bigger risk. Well, now I got to fight my way out, but the tribals are a little bit disorganized because of the attack here, so that should help a little. Desperate attacks by the cav and the phalanx as well, and desperate in the sense that we're taking cohesion hits for moving quickly, etc., that I don't usually like to take. I end up clearing up most of this problem. These guys are going to start routing north, and that's the end of the turn, except for at the cleanup stage. On the next turn, these oxybellies or whatever, well, it's hard to say what's, anyway, these start showing up. Now their special ability is they get to fire twice in an entire activities phase, but it doesn't have to be their actual activation. But when they move on the map, they get these little moved no fire markers, so they're not going to be very effective on the first turn, and basically nothing can stack with them. So I got to be kind of careful with how I use them. But they're going to come on the map and be able to maybe defend the crossing here. You can see that initial vanguard pretty much destroyed, and this, you know, was the most effective start that the barbarians could make, is to make that hit there, but they're not going to be able to hold the ford, and that's kind of the key to the whole thing, is that Alexander's, the pressure is going to come from other directions now. It's not going to be coming from that hill. There's just limits to what you can set up and have in any place. One thing I noticed, which kind of saddens me, because I'm easily saddened, I guess, these are becoming frayed very quickly. Now this is the 2003 edition of the game. Maybe the modern edition has a better print, but you may want to put those in some sort of sleeving or laminate them even, just because they see a lot of use, but they're getting worn more quickly than the old cardstock ones did from, you know, my SPQR. That the guy I bought it from played it heavily. That was clear from the counters. The paper didn't look too bad, and I played a whole bunch of it as well, and these have not gone through anywhere near as much rigor of play, and it's just that kind of modern paper, the glossy stuff. It doesn't, and this isn't paper, this is a stock, but with that glossy coating, it just doesn't hold up the way that good old-fashioned regular paper does to most things. Some things, tobacco stains wipe off of it easier, I'll give it that much. Through the barbarian side of the turn. Moving forward, chased some of the skirmishers away. You can see we're sneaking up behind the phalanx. Hey, one of them's routed. Multiple waves hitting the flank of this phalanx. Finally got lucky it didn't make it save and it broke. It's gone. That's half the points. It's just sitting on the board right now. There's no way that that Alexander can rally that. So he's in a significant amount of trouble right now. And disengaging, always difficult in this system. And that's what this scenario is about. I'm beginning to think the better move is not to try to do this withdrawal, especially since it's particularly difficult with the river behind you. The fire, yeah, it had some effects. We had a unit routed there. This guy didn't get routed after his attack. He got one last shot in. But most of them tried to prevent one of the attacks and most of that fire, and it just wasn't significant. It brought him up to, you know, where he routed when he hit, but, you know, that's pretty easy to do, honestly. The phalanx is going to do a fair amount of damage, even hit from the flank like that. Anyhow, I'm not quite sure. Oh, the Hypastists are being hit as well here. They got struck from the flank, and the flanking unit just got so chewed up on its morale check for going into them that it turned and ran after. But they did some damage, there's no question there. So Alexander failed his momentum check. He's managed to brush back a lot of the opponents. Even pushing back here against the lights there. But that extra action would have been very, very helpful. He could have kept rolling up this line. Skirmishers could have continued firing just to weaken, but I guess the biggie is the heavy infantry smacked here, the cav, driving, trying to clear a pathway. It's going to be a tight one. Of the elite initiative, of course, takes some of the pain out of losing the last action. I continued on here, hitting the heavy infantry, rolling up that flank. The cav, wow, when cav hits the flank of infantry, or the rear, well, the flank primarily, because they can't turn completely to the rear. It often ends up with a really difficult decision for the defender. Do they stand and just take it in the flank, which hurts? That's what this routed unit did. Or do they try to turn and face, which, you know, might allow them to actually do some better damage, and it stops the cav a little bit quicker, which is what this routed unit did. They failed their maneuver check and just ended up broken. So, you know, you can see this whole advance has been largely broken up. Still, point-wise, the Macedonians are halfway there. They've got some real worries, even if the tribals are having a hard time, you know, coalescing a force that can strike where it wants to. Still, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can sneak in behind that phalanx and it may be doomed. It's pretty much over for Alexander. The other phalanx is going. This thing's routed. It'll probably rally, but basically if I lose one more unit, it's all over. It's going to be hard not to. I have probably 2 activations, at least one, to try to extricate myself, but it doesn't look good at all. And yet another turn where Alexander did not get the momentum. Meant he didn't get to try to rally, which is almost always successful. Now, this unit he tried to rally on his turn and he managed to roll the 9 that didn't succeed. I think it doesn't succeed. No, he managed to roll an 8 or a 9. He needs a 7 to succeed. It's just really never fails checks. But now he's got a couple of his rich, valuable units ready to rout off the board. He's got to save them. Really, he can't even sacrifice a skirmisher here at 28 points. That's why he wanted to get the phalanxes off the board, because the rest could kind of hold the line fairly strongly, but those phalanxes are just worth so many points. On the other hand, there are a lot of tribals routing, but it doesn't look like there's enough to make up for, you know, to prevent them from being able to get an attack in somewhere. Even just one that squishes a skirmisher, especially since they've slipped behind here. Alexander uses his elite initiative, an attack over here. With skirmishers, halved and doubled. Halved because their skirmishers, doubled because they've got the rear. These are the special starred skirmishers. They can melee attack for whatever that's worth. Not a great thing, but you know, I gotta try to clear this out of there. You can see I successfully rallied those cav, which means I don't lose automatically at this point. But I'm still in a pretty precarious position out there. Tribals rally a fair amount here and don't really put a lot of pressure on Alexander, which means, hey, he may be able to get out of here. I probably made a mistake by not pushing harder, but it just felt like I was kind of out of gas. These guys are running as hard as they can. And instead of bringing just, you know, 3, 4 units up and hitting, I'm trying to bring a whole formation up, because a couple of units piecemeal I think Alexander can deal with. That's part of the reason why I'm rallying stuff. Part of it's just I hate to lose route points, things going off. It's sort of a natural reaction for me. If it weren't for this unit, I would say Alexander's got a pretty good chance of getting off the map at this point. But that unit's enough to end this. He loses that along with the 28 points he's already got in the bank. And that's not a wimpy little unit either. It's all over. So he's got to kind of shove back and push the tribals back. And that's going to be tough because they've had this chance to reform. Turn all those nice mobile things, the companions, the Hephaestus, end up able to clear most of this line out of the way. So now there's a route back. Unfortunately, I also launched an attack with these guys and they pushed further forward. My rallied forces recovering quite nicely. And I've got the tribals up to 69 points. Their routed units that are on the board are enough to break their army if they end up either leaving or failing rallies or whatever. So it's not a hopeless situation. But like I said, it's a close run thing at this point. Alexander uses his initiative to solidify his perimeter, basically. And a big important part of that was launching an attack with this guy against these two. Yeah, he routed. And it could have lost me the game if I lost the leader there. But the advantage to it all is now he's no longer in contact. I don't have to fight the hordes, whatever's left of them, in order to, this should not be fatigued, in order to free that one unit. My cav moved up from the fort. It's totally healed into a position, and now I can do significant counterattacks. I managed to pop the unit here in a post-combat morale check. That puts it up to 74. 2 more tribal units go and it's all over for them. So, and one of them's right here ready to run off the map. So basically, as long as I can keep my losses kind of low, I'm not going to have too big a deal. Because I haven't really been trying to withdraw too carefully or too well, and you don't have the tribals in range of these artillery here, they haven't really played too much of a part, except for at one point, kind of in the early-ish stage of the game, where they drove away some of the units. That's the problem. I don't know how many turns I've played. It's under 10, and I don't think the game's going to run to 10, but I haven't been tracking that, didn't think to pay attention to it. I should be counting them off. I'd say it's probably around 5 or 6 at this point, maybe, as a maximum. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. One side or the other is going to break before we hit the 10. But that is one of the considerations, is you only have a certain amount of time as the Macedonians to get off the map, even if you're trying to not get off the map anymore. Unfortunately, routed units are great targets. One of these light infantry came up, failed with its javelin, but then won the pre-combat morale. Routed that unit. I'm not going to finish out the turn. It's possible that the Macedonians could get a victory here, you know, or could drive the tribals over the edge as well. But I'm calling this a Macedonian loss no matter what. You know, I failed completely in the withdrawal side of things. I want to get on to something else. And my day is most of the way done. Unfortunately, pretty skies today, but I would like to start up 1844 actually, just to make good old Robin Hoodlum happy. Huh? As I was putting away Pelium here, yeah, I'll be back to the second part of the battle later, but I noticed I cheated in favor of the tribals. I gave them Libyan veterans with a 6 tactical quality instead of the tribal medium infantry with 5. Again, you know, we don't really know all that much about how accurate these numerical representations are, so we'll just chalk it up to, you know, hey, they were particularly excited about the attack at that point. They wouldn't, the nighttime attack, they're not going to be happy about, I can assure you. That's supposed to be a blowout for Macedonia. Anyway, that's just a final. You know, I did want to say, I really enjoyed that scenario. I know I cut it short, but I thought it was really nicely balanced, and showed some interesting things that you don't normally see in GBOH. So the withdrawal as a goal and such not. That's one that I think deserves a little bit of special note as, you know, something that's a little treat in the box for the Great Battles of Alexander.